Well, okay. Hi there. Uh, how's everything? It's been a while, right? Uh, I've uh, been trying to, kind of work on three or four projects all at the same time, and it's getting too hectic. That's why I haven't uploaded anything. Uh, this video, particularly, took about, I think, like an entire week to work on, and because I had other things working to work on simultaneously as well. It was kind of hectic to kind of try to manage everything all at once. So this video is about two books that I read, one of which was something that I read way before this one, and the other one is actually something that I read recently, and it was a good book, to be honest. Both of them are pretty great books. Uh, the first one is Albert Camus' The Stranger. The second one is Osamu Dazai, No Longer Human. And these two books actually have a lot of similarities with each other. Like, I've talked to people, some of them have read, Kamo's book, some of them have read Dazai's book, some of them read both of them, but nobody really uh, catched up on the similarities between these two characters. I'm not trying to, like, tell you the entire story, but I will spoil the story, of course. So if you're not okay with that, feel free to just log off, go out there, read these two books. Don't read No Longer Human if you're feeling depressed, but read these two books, and we're gonna talk about them. I'm mostly going to focus on the similarities that I catched up on and the stuff that, I thought that were interesting. Starting off with The Stranger, which I'm going to show you some illustrations and things like that on the screen while doing this. I mean, that's the proper way to do it. If Vendigoon is doing it, then that's probably the right way to do it. The thing is that The Stranger is a pretty great gateway to the absurdist philosophy, and it's the initial and entry point for people who feel like they need to subscribe to this sort of belief. Now, absurdism and people who try to behave in that philosophy is actually a pretty interesting topic in and of itself. It's basically one of the philosophies that people either come up with themselves or they subscribe to when they come face to face with the reality of the world being a meaningless and pointless, darkness filled just agony. And they constantly think about how they can avoid, or they can't avoid coercion. And they have no willpower, they have pretty much no responsibility and no ability to actually respond in that regard, meaning that they can't change anything, they can't fix anything, they can't react in a certain way to everything in the world, because none of it really matters at the end of the day. It's when people realize that there's no afterlife and they become these hopeless beings. Now, absurdism takes this sort of belief and says that, does it really need to have a meaning? Does it really need to have a point? It's random, so enjoy it, I guess. Just go with the flow and enjoy the ride. That's the kind of philosophy that absurdism has, in contradiction to, contrary to nihilism and, for example, existentialism. Nihilism basically stays in that darkness, but absurdism says, well, if it's random, then it must be a pretty wild ride. And The Stranger is pretty much about that. It really tries to get really, really close to showing people the existential problems and the problems that they face when they realize they have no willpower, or that nothing they do really changes anything. Although in this particular book, unlike his other book, the one that's about Sisyphus, Camus doesn't really say that one must imagine Sisyphus happy. The Stranger is pretty much really dark, and the only occasion which we will get to that the character in the book, The Stranger, feels happy and feels at peace is a very strange one indeed. But I don't want to spoil it yet. I will get to all of it, but the problem, or rather the adventure or the situation that this character faces, which is actually in a very condensed manner. It's 77 pages, and it's interesting how fast things escalate and how you get where you get to by the end of the book, is that the whole process starts with the main character's mother figure passing away, and you're immediately face to face with this character that just does not have any sort of remorse, any sort of regret, or any sort of sorrow, melancholy, or anything of that regard towards his mother. He's extremely indifferent, extremely numb, and extremely poker-faced towards all of this. It seems like the people who are working in the mother's funeral are actually way more engaged in this process than the kid himself. But after a while, after it passes through, a day, like the day of, her mother's passing, which again is described in this very casual manner. They call him, they say that, your mother's passed away, and he's like, oh, okay, I guess I need to go to the funeral now. So he goes to the funeral, and then, not shedding a single tear. He does not remember her mother's age. He does not really care about, her pretty much at all. Doesn't stay there to cry or mourn or anything of that regard. And not really a day after that, he gets a girlfriend named Mary. Now, Mary is a very interesting individual. Mary is pretty much this sort of like pick-me girl that just wants to, just wants to hang around and just wants to, kind of enforce herself on another person in a way. Like, nowhere in the entire book do you see a single fraction of this guy really being, into her, or, having this passion, or feeling like, my God, I love Mary so much, I can't wait to spend more time with her. No, none of that. That doesn't exist here. It's pretty much throughout the entire story, Mary is the girl who is, kind of like taking this guy out and constantly telling him that, love me, or let's get married, or things like that, which are pretty interesting situations. For example, the moment Mary realizes that, the stranger's mother has passed away, she appropriately says that, well, I'm sorry and my condolences and things like that. But the stranger is like, well, I mean, it's not my fault. Why are you saying it like that? I don't care. And the other moment that Mary asks him to, let's get married. We can be a great couple. And he says, very nonchalantly, sure. Why not? I don't see why not. Let's get married. And Mary says, but you don't really sound too amused by that. And he says, well, yeah, it really doesn't matter to me. I don't care really. And she says, well, I mean, if anybody else just came up to you and said, let's get married, would you say yes? And he said, yeah, of course. By the end of the day, none of it really matters. Why would I care? So you're dealing with this kind of person. This guy has an extremely bad case of not being able to say no to anything. Like, throughout the entire book, there are plenty of occasions that, you see immediate red flags, like stuff that I will get to right now, that you're like, well, I mean, do you really want to mess with this situation? Do you really want to, get yourself into this sort of hassle? Like, you don't want that. That's too much trouble. Why do you say yes? But judging by that sort of mentality, it's probably because, he believes that it doesn't really matter if I say yes or no. So just whatever they're asking me, I'll just say yes, I guess. So, for example, this one part of about in the book, the character basically is unable to say yes to, or rather say no to a neighbor of his. He was this neighbor is called Raymond. Raymond is, as it says in the book, a pimp. Raymond is not really well known, he's infamous in the neighborhood, and people don't like his short temper. So, Raymond, when he sees that this stranger does not really have, a willpower of his own and is saying yes to everything, and Raymond has a big mouth, contrary to the stranger who just keeps to himself and doesn't say anything because, obviously it doesn't matter. Why would I say anything? He just keeps talking and talking and talking, and he loves to hear himself talk, just like me. So he says that, let's be friends, and invites him to his house, and it's a mess of, posters and things like that. And he asks him that, like, this is all when, the stranger knows that Raymond is not really a cool guy. You shouldn't mess around with this guy. So Raymond asks him that, I've had this pretty bad case of, a cheating girlfriend or wife or whatever, and she's such a bad brat. I just want to get rid of her, and she's cheating on me. She took all my money and all of that, and I want to take revenge. You know what I'm gonna do? I want to write a letter to hurt her feelings to the point that she comes to my house, and then I can have a conversation with her. So he asks the stranger to write a letter to her, and he says, yeah, okay. That's all when the stranger knows exactly how short-tempered this person is. Because not only minutes ago, Raymond has told him about a street fight that he was, he indulged in, where he was literally beating someone to death. So he says, yeah, sure, buddy. Yeah, of course I'm gonna do it. And it's not because of fear. Nowhere in the book the stranger feels fear or, immediate tension or anxiety. At least not here. He's just like, well, sure, I guess. You want me to write something? I'll write it for you. So, he starts writing, and his literacy skills are, applauded by Raymond. And after a while, the they send a letter, and then you see how the stranger feels when he's encountering some other individuals, such as his other neighbor that treats his dog very badly and constantly hits the dog, grabs his leash and pulls him from left to right and things like that. Yet he's extremely indifferent to it. He couldn't care less. And after a while, that woman that this Raymond and the stranger have talked with and talked with about. This woman comes up to Raymond's apartment, gets beaten to a pulp, to the point that a police officer comes and interferes, and they take Raymond to the police office, and they're trying to talk to him about what the hell are you doing to this woman. And funnily enough, when they explain to the police that she's a cheating wife and she's a pretty bad case of taking people's money and things like that, they let him off. So there are other points in the story that are very, very interesting. I mean, aside from what's gonna happen after this point, are when you realize that the stranger has been having these affairs of going to comedy movies and comedy shows and swimming in the ocean with his new fiancée, and they're having best time of their lives. I mean, although the stranger seems like he keeps saying that I wasn't too bothered by it, or like I wouldn't say that I hated it, but I can't say that I really enjoyed it either. It's not pleasantly amusing or things like that, but it's not bad either. So it's like his instincts, like the animal instincts that he has towards opposite gender and things like that, they're still somewhat active, but mental in his head and in the mentality of this character is completely numb and doesn't really care. So it's very interesting that not only a week has passed since his mother's passing, and he's immediately in a comedy show with this woman, and also in the in this crazy relationship with his neighbors, and also with this newly found fiance that he couldn't care less about. So putting all of that aside, not really indulging into these weird wordings and things like that, it is a pretty interesting book. I mean, I don't want to talk about it too much. I want people to read it as well. So they go to a beach together, Raymond, Mary, the stranger, and another friend of them called Mason, I think. If I'm butchering his name, please forgive me. They go to this beach, and along the way they become best buddies, because everyone loves a blank sheet of paper that doesn't really talk much and keeps listening and is very easygoing with everything. Raymond explains to our friend the stranger that after I beat that woman into a pulp and she became a bloody mess, her brothers apparently are onto me, and they're Arabs. Apparently, I mean, they never really say like if the woman was an Arab as well, or why do you talk about Arabs like that? Like, what point does this make? Aside from when in the courtroom that I will explain later, it gets brought up again, but it doesn't really matter that much. Basically, there are men out there trying to beat my ass, and you need to be careful right now. They're on to me. So they go to the beach, they have fun, they just swim around, eat lunch, and laze around. It's a party. After they have their lunch and things like that, they go on a walk where they will meet these, you know, dangerous individuals. I think there's two of them or two of them. Yeah, two of these individuals, and they have knives. They have, you know, all sorts of weapons, and they're trying to kill these three dudes. So at the moment of conflict, they basically ask the stranger to stay out of this, step aside. We don't want you to get into trouble, and we want to make sure if somebody else comes up, you can, you know, handle that guy. So the stranger just stands back, irresponsible to anything that's gonna happen, doesn't really say anything, he just stands back and watches as these two men are two of his friends versus two of his enemies are fighting each other to death. There's a moment in there where the stranger tries to warn, Raymond that there's a guy with a knife trying to, you know, slice you up, but he doesn't say anything. Like, it says that he wanted to say something, but he was too slow. But, you know, do that as you will. So the guy gets sliced up in his mouth and in his arm. They immediately take him to, I think, either a police office or into somewhere where they can stitch him up. I think they either send him to a hospital or to a police office. So after they stitch him up and all of that, Raymond, gives his pistol to the stranger either then or beforehand, like before they got into a conflict. He gives him the pistol, and the stranger basically keeps the pistol with himself. He goes back to the beach, and the beach is very, very hot. Now, there are plenty of ways that you can actually interpret this, thing about beach being very hot, or this is constantly brought up in the book, heat and everything being so unfathomably hot in the air, and the characters just being unable to handle all the hot temperature. This was interpreted in the way that this is probably him saying that he just can't handle emotions, and whenever he's overwhelmed, or whenever he's encountering some huge wave of emotion, he just starts to feel extremely heated, or that he is very, very sensitive to the environment around him, both on a physiological level and on a physical level, as his skin, or he keeps sweating, or things like that. It's either that he's unable to interpret this sort of tension, and he just keeps calling it that the air is apparently very, very hot right now, or he's just extremely sensitive to the temperature, and on a psychological level as well. Do with that as you will. I do not agree with the fact that the stranger is a very sensitive individual. I do believe that he's probably suffering from some form of autism. That can be true, but I don't know. I feel like he's either suffering from autism, as I said, or that he's just, repressing his emotions extremely, which we will get to later on. So anyway, the guy comes back. He is walking in the beach, and he sees one of these Arabs coming up to him, and he sees that, well, it's too hot to go back. It's the sun's blinding me, and I can't really go back. It's too hot. So all I can do is move forward, and you're not gonna let me move forward. So the only thing that he decides to do at that point is that he just pulls his gun out, or Raymond's gun out, and shoots the guy. Not only does he shoot the guy once, he actually shoots the guy a couple more times, 3 I think, or 4 times. Yeah, 4 times to be sure. when the guy is dead. So, as you would imagine, that does not really go unnoticed. The stranger gets sentenced to prison, and there's this extremely long, interrogation phases and courtrooms that he just has to go through, and they just keep on asking him questions and questioning whether this guy is even human. He does not have any sort of moral compass at all. He just doesn't believe in anything. He does not care about anything. So it's strange that he even killed this guy. Like, why would you care? But, the courtroom itself is actually pretty interesting because, you see all these different characters coming up, and, you see the stranger looking up to them, and just seeing them, as in like analyzing their faces and things like that. Not once, like throughout the entire courtroom phase, not once is he looking forward to seeing Mary. Like every time that he sees Mary, he's like, oh, I forgot Mary's also over here. That's interesting. I was too busy, I was kind of preoccupied. The heat's too much. The courtroom is getting really exhausting, and I don't feel like thinking about Mary right now. Which, I mean, dog, you two were about to get married. She paid you visit in prison. How can you just not see her? How can you not care? Anyway, you also see other characters coming up. Most of them have nothing bad to say about the stranger. Raymond continuously says that it's all my fault. This guy was, fooled by me. He didn't do anything. He's innocent. Please just get him out of here. And they keep telling him to shut up. This is not for you to decide. And Mason does the same thing. Nobody really hates this guy. Nobody has any. They either have nothing to say about him, or they have positive things to say about him, which is a very interesting point when you think about it. Just because he kept saying yes to everything, and everything and all things that thrown at him, everyone just likes this guy. He's a pretty chill guy. He's pretty safe, and he doesn't really do anything. And all we say, he says yes. But he doesn't really he doesn't really grasp that. Like, never in the entire, process does he feel like, well, thank God, at least the witnesses aren't saying anything bad about me. Which is weird, because he did the same thing when the other neighbor that he had, I think Solomano, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, who had a dog that he kept on beating the dog, and when the dog went away once and for all, he was extremely sad. And it's a complicated relationship, right? Like, it's sort of like a domestic abuse, or that animal abuse situation going on, because the guy loves the dog, but at the same time the dog annoys him to death, and it's a mutual problematic situation where he allows the dog to annoy him, and then he annoys the dog. He hits the dog, and the dog starts barking at him when he wants to sleep. He tells the dog not to do that, not to do this. The dog does exactly that, and then he hits him. And somehow, throughout all of this violence and all of this pain that they give and trade off with each other, the owner of the dog somehow misses the dog, and he loves the dog, and he says that, I miss him. I can't replace that dog with anything in my life. I haven't missed someone this hard since my wife passed away. And it's interesting because the stranger, our main character, just can't understand any of that. Like, he either can't understand any of that, or he just doesn't really care. And it's interesting because it's a very complicated situation in a psychological level, and in a moral and social level. and this character just cannot comprehend that. Anyway, cutting the story short, the courtroom and all the stuff that happened there basically end with the stranger being sentenced to death because, well, first of all, you killed an immigrant. This is where the Arabs come in, and you also lack any sort of humanity inside of you, which is the main thing that the other the lawyer and the jury and all of that just ride on, because they continuously want to try to paint this guy as inhumane as possible, something that that this guy is inhuman, or rather he can't comprehend humanity probably. He's not really a monster, but they sentence him to death anyway. So during his sentencing, and after he gets sent to a prison and he's awaiting his death, he constantly goes through his philosophy of this is the interesting part of the book, like the last 10 pages. This is where things get really interesting. He goes on and on about how life just doesn't have any meaning, doesn't have any point. We're all gonna die, and even if I lived right now, I would have died anyway, and nothing would have made a difference. And there's this instinctively driven fear of death inside of him, but he keeps on repressing that emotion, which leads me to believe that he actually has the ability to feel and to be sympathetic and empathetic towards other people, but he just refuses to do that. And I will get to why he refuses to do that. So he just keeps on telling himself that it doesn't matter, calm down, there's no need to feel happy, or there's no need to feel sad. There's points where he feels sad or scared that he's gonna die. He calms himself and tells himself that it's meaningless and all of that, and then he falls off the other side of the roof, and he says that well, it's great, I've done so much these past few days, and he feels so happy and so energetic, because suddenly he's kind of fooling himself into something else. And then he keeps on telling himself that no, you shouldn't be happy, you shouldn't be anything like that, and just keeps himself in this nullificated state where he's not even happy or sad. He's just indifferent about everything. He spends his days sleeping, recollecting his memories, going through details, not really feeling nostalgic, just spending time, killing time. And nowhere in between all of this has he asked for a chaplain, or kind of like a priest, to come to his cell and where he could pray. He never did that. And one day the chaplain just comes up to him and says, well, why didn't you do that? I mean, don't you fear death? Don't you fear the afterlife? Or don't you want forgiveness for your sins? God will forgive you, Christ will forgive you, and things like that. And this is the second time that he's encountering this sort of religious behavior, and this time around he starts lashing out furiously, raging on and on about how no, there's no hope, there is no afterlife, there is no such thing as forgiveness, there's no God, there's no Christ that is going to save me or died for my sins or whatever of that regard. He's extremely opposed to that fact. As he says himself, he doesn't know what interests him, but he knows exactly what doesn't interest him, and he tries to, push it away. After he does that, and he throws a fit, and they calm him down, and the escort the chaplain away. uh this is the only time in the entire book that our character feels good, and I want to read the part of this book for you myself, so that you see what I mean, what kind of book we're dealing with. Almost for the first time in many months, I thought of my mother, and now it seemed to me I understood why at her life's end she had taken a fiance. uh, you know just case in point, they've said that his mother, before her death, like the very last few weeks, she actually had a fiance of some sort, some sort of love affair going on into the place that she was staying in. She was sent to what you call it, the houses for keeping old people. Forgot what the hell that was. They just keep referring to it as the house. That's why I forgot what it's called. So she had a fiance, and he's recollecting his memories about his mother. Almost for the first time in many months, I thought of my mother, and now it seemed to me I understood why at her life's end she had taken a fiance. Why she'd played at making a fresh start. There too, in that home where lives were flickering out, the dusk came as a mournful solace. With death so near, Mother must have felt like someone on the brink of freedom, ready to start life all over again. No one, no one in the world had any right to weep for her, and I too felt ready to start life all over again. So basically, he believes that the reason that he didn't cry for his mother is that, well, she felt the best that she could have felt these past few weeks, and she, to him, even though she had a meaningless life, there's not really a reason to cry for her, especially since she had such a great life in the past, her last few weeks. And after that, he's executed the same way that his father, way back in the day, as the only memory that he has of his mother, and of his father coming from his mother. And the only time that you hear his father mentioned throughout the entire book is when he remembers that memory of his father, that he was very, very interested to see an execution, a public execution, and he went there, and then he threw up, and he had this extremely sickening imagery stuck in his head, which he couldn't get it out anytime. So he somehow at the last days of his life, he just keeps remembering that, and he says to himself when he's about to get executed that, I just hope that there's a huge crowd of spectators, and they're just howling out, and they're wanting to they're just wanting to hear me, like see me die. And I hope that that's at least going to lead into something meaningful, in a way, like there's something coming out of this. So that's weird. Like, it's a very odd scenario, but more than anything, as I said, it's the stranger repressing his humane emotions and his ability to sympathize. He never tried to write books. He keeps saying that he has read some books, but he never says that he has written anything. It never says that Uh, it never says that he participated in any form of art or any form of outlet whatsoever. He never talks about his feelings, and he never accepts hope. Probably because he feels like hope is a bad thing, because when you get hopeful, then you will be disappointed. And he doesn't want to be happy, because being it then turning sad feels way worse. So he just keeps himself in this null state that is extremely inhuman, and just goes on with whatever that comes up, and spends his life. An act that pretty much costs him his head. You could have avoided all of this if you just said no, or if you just cared. Or the only time that he should have not cared about anything was the first time that he just draw his gun and started shooting. If only then he just was like, well, I don't care if I live or die anyway, come at me. The other guy was hesitant to attack him. He probably wouldn't have attacked him with his knife, but he didn't do that, and he shot the man, and that cost him his entire life. The fact that he didn't participate in anything other than his job and going home and sleeping, and doesn't have any favorite shows, doesn't have anything really, never reacted to anything, never felt any sort of responsibility towards anything, made the case extremely hard for his one and only lawyer to get him out of the pickle that he's in. Because, like, what am I going to work with? All that we know is that you just went there and you killed the man. There's nothing else going on here. And it also gave room to other people to apply, project this monstrosity on him that, cost him his execution. That was The Stranger. The other book that I read, which unfortunately I don't think I can show you much illustrations about, because Vendigun, shout out to Vendigun, he already made a very, very long video about it, and he talked about the entire story of Osamu Dazai. I'm not going to go through all of that. I'm not going to go into nitty-gritty of things, and I don't think I'm gonna show any excerpts or anything from that book, mainly because I don't have it here. But I'm not going to show illustrations either, because it's Junji Ito's manga, most of it. But the thing that was very interesting to me was that both of these characters lacked humanity. One of them repressed his humanity, the stranger. The other one also did do some sort of repression, but it became such a tradition and such a habit for him that he no longer could do the opposite of it. And because of that, both of these people stopped believing in, emotions, interaction, social life, morals, or anything of that regard. Both of these characters ended up dying because of their lack of empathy, sympathy, and responsibility to life. Osamu Dazai's character, which is unfortunately pretty much a one-to-one representation of his own life, basically died because he just couldn't really do anything in his life. He felt powerless to change or to move, to say no and not go with the flow at all. And he never appreciated the life that he had, because it wasn't his. It was something that was applied to him. It was something that was projected onto him. He was whatever everyone wanted him to be. They just kept on telling him that, like, let's do this, let's get married, let's, go to a party, let's drink, let's do this, let's do that. And he's constantly trying to please people and constantly trying to say yes to everything that comes up because he couldn't care less. When you say no, your yeses also mean something. But when you say yes to everything, that basically means that you don't care anyway. And that process made his entire life meaningless, pointless, to the point that he just felt like suicide is the only option. Death was the best thing that he could have thought about. It was relief and it was a fresh start. It was something like a new beginning, in a way. The same way that the stranger at the face of death, he feels alive again. He feels like, well, it's perfect. I'm perfectly free to do whatever I want right now. At the very last moment that they want to die, they feel free and alive and ready to start again. Because for the first time, apparently, maybe, they just feel like they're not obliged to anything. And they feel like they are truly reaching their pointlessness and their freedom to do whatever they want without any consequences whatsoever. Think about it, like when you have this hectic life filled with deadlines and things to do, then one day you realize an asteroid is going to hit the earth and everything is going to go to, ruin. A lot of people are gonna be happy because then they realize they're not gonna go to work and we can do whatever the hell we want right now. We're free. And that sort of chaotic liberty is two things that the stranger and Dazai probably felt, because both of them wanted to just be able to represent themselves. As Dazai keeps saying, like, he always wanted to paint and show people the visions that he has, but he's unable to do that. He's unable to show his emotions, and because of how much it hurts every single time that he wants to represent himself and he gets lashed out at, and nobody understands him and he feels more alone and more sad because of that, he starts repressing that. And after a while, that repression and keeps saying yes to everything that comes up and just going with the flow turns his life into this random ruin of chaos. And it spirals out of control, out of any sort of hope whatsoever, and both of these characters kind of end up dying. Now, the cool thing, or rather the conclusion, the whatever you want to call it, that you could learn from both these stories is that there is, as Chris Cornell would like to say, there is no such thing as nothing. You keep trying to fill yourself with emptiness, and sometimes you try to find, as it said in The Stranger, you try to find solace in pure hopelessness and death. And there's a sense of, as Kurt Cobain would like to say, or some sort of comfort in being depressed or sad, because you know that it's not going to get any worse than this. And keeping yourself in a meaningless, pointless, null state, although it does enable you to move forward in time, it drives you into chaos. And essentially, the randomness and this chaotic world that we're living in with thousands of possibilities starts to apply some sort of chaotic meaning into your life. The same thing is happening from other people. They're trying to apply their meaning and their character onto you. And since you're such an easy to mold being, you just turn into whatever everyone else wants you to be. So then, like Dazai said in his book, people, called him an angel, even though he's far from that. He's just saying yes to everything and everything. And the same thing in the courtroom of the stranger, because he said yes and he went with the flow whenever whoever wanted to. Everyone's okay with him. Nobody's saying anything bad about him. No one's saying that this guy's a piece of shit. He killed that man. He's a irresponsible man. He doesn't do anything. Everyone likes him, but that means that you really don't have any character. You're liked by everyone because you said yes to everything and you went with the flow. So the world, being the chaotic mess that it is projecting itself onto your life, and other people are also trying to project some sort of meaning onto you because you're null. You're nothing. You're empty. And there is no such thing as nothing. Because the moment nothing is, actualized, everyone and everything is trying to fill it in with some sort of meaning. And that's why we have existentialism. The idea that the life that we are living in, the same way as Camus says, the same way as Nietzsche would like to say, is meaningless. It is pointless, it is chaotic, and it is random. But it can be not that. You can apply your own meaning to it. You can change it into something better. And if you don't apply your own meaning to it, believe me, somebody else will do it. This was, Camus' book. Of course, I'm not sure if it's based on any sort of reality. It's probably entirely fictional, but, he's a great philosopher. And Dazai's book, which is entirely based on his life, just goes to show that living a life of nothingness and null basically turns it into a chaotic mess by the end of it. It's not nothingness. You have something inside of you. The stranger had a lot of emotions, as many would like to say, and he just continuously kept repressing that. The moment that he starts yelling out and starts being angry and he says that felt great, just goes to show that somewhere deep down inside there are so many things left to say that he never did. He never talked, he never had any sort of outlet. And the same thing went for Dazai. He always wanted to do something else. He wanted to be somebody else. He wanted to, instead of, being who he was, he wanted to paint. He wanted to do different things. He never did any of that. He never was able to say who he was and represent his ideas properly, and nobody else cared to hear him. Everybody else was too busy talking and projecting themselves that they forgot to hear. So basically, both of these guys just showcase that there's no such thing as nothing, and you can't escape into nothingness. You can't escape to the void, and you should try and apply some meaning into your life instead of trying to repress your emotions and ideologies. Find an outlet, let yourself talk, let yourself free, express yourself, and don't be afraid to say no, so that you will have the power of giving meaning to your own life. Because if you don't do that, others will decide it for you. And again, as Chris Cornell would like to say, maybe to lose or to save your soul is the choice of how you feel the whole. So, yeah, that's my peace of mind that I got from reading these two books. I mean, I could have been represented better, I guess, but I think that this is the best, sort of conclusion that you could have gotten out of it. The moral of the story, as some would like to say. And yeah, the next 3 videos that I'm going to make, one of them is actually pretty easy. The other 2 are extremely hard. One of them requires me to read a bunch of articles. It's way more fun than this one. And another one of them requires me to read another huge book. And it's actually going to be a very long video. But anyway, 3 videos are coming up, and I'm gonna work hard on them. Sorry if I said the names incorrectly. Sorry if I, zoned out anywhere in there. I'm trying to, recollect my thoughts. There's no script here. I just have the page of the book here in front of me, and that's pretty much it. I don't have any script, and that's why sometimes it turns into a mess and I start stuttering and things like that. You know what it is. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.